G'day guys, Geale mate, Big J here. Welcome to another edition of Aussie Boxing Talk. The show literally punches you right between the fucking eyes. So, another interesting one for you today. So, in an extension of my Best Fighters in Each Division series, I've decided to bring in a new series, which I hope you guys find entertaining and educational, called Compare the Pair. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take boxers, each one from each division, and compare them to the best guy in another division. All right, or a similar boxer had a similar career. So I think I'm going to go to compare the pair to actually find out, through your votes, hopefully this works, who is the greatest boxer of all time from Australia. Okay, same rules apply, guys, as before. I'm only going to be talking about the guys that got to the best of their divisions, and now I'm going to compare their careers. So to start off with, we're going to get straight into it with probably the guys who would be at the top of this list, who's had the best career of Australia or from Australia of all time. Now I'm talking about belts won, achievements, and significant fights. If we're talking money, that's pretty unfair, because if we're talking money, Mundine and George Kambosos Jr. win that hands down. Well, Jeff Horn would also be up there. But if you're talking money, I mean, you can't compare, what Lionel Rose was earning compared to what George Kambosos is earning. You can't even compare. So, money's not going to be... the biggest earner in Australian boxing history would be either Mundine, or probably Mundine, or George Kambosos Jr. Maybe Jeff Horn. Maybe Jeff Horn? No, I don't think so. It'd have to be Mundine or George Kambosos. I don't know. But anyway, we'll get away from that. So what we're going to do is compare the pair. So their careers, who they fought, what belts they won, significant fights they had, all that sort of stuff. So today we're going to start off with the best lightweight we've ever had, George Kambosos Jr. versus the best middleweight we've ever had in Daniel Geale. So, everything from top to bottom. So, George Kambosos Jr., I know he's still currently fighting, has a record of 22-4 with 10 KOs. All right. So, George started his career in, when was it? Now, I'm not going to go into amateur careers here because, I don't really have the stats on their amateur careers, right? Less stuff I know off the top of my head. So, yeah, we'll leave the amateur career. We're just talking about pro careers here. All right, so started in first fight, 18th of May, 2013. All right, hang on, what's going on there? So 18th of May 2013, George had his pro career debut, right? Had his career debut, right? And his last fight was obviously earlier this year against Richardson Hitchens, which unfortunately he lost. So, we know the story about George. He started coming to presence around, let's say, the Mickey Bay fight, who he beat a former IBF champion, I'm pretty sure, Mickey Bay. He beat him in 10 rounds in Madison Square Garden. Then he fought former IBF featherweight title holder Lee Selby, beat him in a 12-round split decision. Then, of course, he went on to fight Teofimo Lopez for the WBC franchise, IBF, WBO, and WBA Super Lightweight Championships. So, George got the upset of the year in 2021 when he beat Lopez. But this was at the Hulu Center, not the actual Madison Square Garden. All right? This was at the Hulu Center. Okay? So, the smaller venue. Then, of course, George went on to have the second biggest crowd attendance of all time in Australia, fighting Devin Haney for Undisputed. The first and only time an Australian has ever fought for Undisputed on Australian soil, because their next fight, all the belts weren't there. Undisputed. in a, what was it, 42,000? I mean, I was there. How many people were there? 42,000 seat arena in Marvel Stadium in Melbourne. Unfortunately lost that, then lost the rematch in Rod Laver Arena. Then got a gift decision against Maxie Hughes in, I think that was in Arizona somewhere. It says here, Fire Lake Arena, Swanee. I think that's in Arizona. Not 100% sure. So won an IBO belt, right? Then fought Jake Wiley, and then fought Richards Hitchens for his IBF belt earlier this year, but was knocked out in 8 rounds via TKO knockout via Richards and Hitchens in June of this year. So, I mean, George has achieved certainly a hell of a lot in a very short amount of time. Right? A hell of a lot in a short amount of time. I mean, what he's done in the last 4 years, is nothing short of amazing. I mean, he got the biggest upset of the year in 2021. He had the second biggest fight, well, probably the biggest fight in Australian boxing history, most significant fight of all time on Australian soil the following year. Then had 2 undisputed fights in the space of 4 months in Australia. Then got another belt, and then fought one of the all-time greats in Vasily Lomachenko. So this is what I'm talking about. The resume of George Kambosos Jr. is absolutely phenomenal. Now it's still unwritten. See, if George was 15 years retired or even 5 years retired, you would know how good Devin Haney or Teofimo is. We all know how good Lomachenko is, or was, because he's now retired. But there's still question marks over Haney and Lomachenko. Haney and Lopez, who have both won belts at 140 after winning all the belts at 135. So, how good are these guys going to be longevity-wise? Only time will tell. But at the moment, George has faced, when he fought them, they were all on the top 10 pound-for-pound list. Obviously, they're not now. I don't think Haney or Lopez is on the top 10 pound-for-pound list at the moment. I'm pretty sure they're not. But at the time, they were. So that is absolutely phenomenal in the fighters that George has faced. And all world title fights. Right? So it's not like he was fighting them when they were all washed up and past their best. He fought them. He fought a prime Lopez. He fought a prime Haney twice. Yes, he fought an aging Lomachenko, but he fought an old Lomachenko because Lomachenko is now retired, but he still fought Lomachenko. That's ridiculous. I mean, what an absolutely crazy achievement. Second biggest crowd of all time in Australia, and the 2 most significant fights in Australia of all time. Right? International. Unfortunately, George is one of those rare fighters. In fact, probably the only fighter where he is 0 for 3 in world title fights in Australia. I can't think of any Australians who are 0 for 3 in world title fights. I'm just trying to think. Yeah. I can't think of any Australian fighter who has a 0% win rate for world title fights in Australia. Maybe the only other one is possibly Jeff Hitman Harding, but I'd have to look up his record because I know he did lose at Rod Laver Arena just like George did. I'd have to look that up. But yeah, 0 for 3 in world title fights. Yeah, and, actually George had a good fight with Lomachenko over in Perth, which I actually got to go to. So I show no bias here. I'm actually not going to vote. I want you guys to put obviously just George or Daniel or 1 and 2. I want to hear your guys' votes in the comment section who you're actually going for. Right, so that's George Kambosos. Let's move on to Daniel Geale, our best ever middleweight. Sorry, I already had this up, but So Daniel, the real deal Geale. 31-5 with 16 KOs. Right. Fought the likes of, started his career, I think it would have been in the early 2000s, because he did go to Manchester. I'm pretty sure he won gold at the Manchester Commonwealth Games in 2002. Pretty sure he did. Okay, so Started his career 20... Oh, right. When did he start his career? What the... What's going on here? Hang on. Hit it on something. Sorry. Technical bloody difficulties. Fucking hell, look at this. What the fuck's going on here? All right, here we go. Daniel Geale. Started his career... Oh, what the fuck's going on now? Fucking iPad. In case you don't know, I don't edit my videos. So started his career... Oh, who the fuck's that? Fucking hell. Anyway, started his career in 2004, right? Won his first belt IBO in 2007 versus Daniel Dawson, right? Held that for 2 years until he fought Chock in May of 2009, which is significant. Probably one of the second best all-time Aussie versus Aussie fights, and certainly for world titles. The only fight to succeed Chock Geale #1 is Barry Michael Lester Ellis. That's the best Australian fight of all time. Everyone knows that. So Chock versus Daniel Geale #1 is a very close second. Geale unfortunately lost that belt, lost that fight to Chock, but he did avenge the loss almost 4 years later. So won the IBO belt in 2007, lost it to Chock in 2008, then went the big time and went over to Germany to beat Sebastian Sylvestre for the IBF strap in 2011, in May 2011. Held that belt for another year with another 2 defenses, right, against Emersali Albert and Arminia. I can't even pronounce these guys' names. Then fought Felix Strum in the unification bout back in Germany on 1st of September 2012 to win the WBA middleweight title and the IBF middleweight title. Daniel Geale remains to this day the only Australian fighter, right, male, because you got to throw Shanika Johnson in there, she just did this herself, to win a unification bout, meaning title for title. So Geale put up his IBF against Felix Strum's WBA and won. I mean, yes, George has been in unification bouts. Tim Tszyu was in a unification bout. That was a unified. That wasn't unification. Because Sebastian Fendora wasn't the WBC. It doesn't matter, he lost. Right? So Daniel Geale, to this day, is the only Australian born and bred to go overseas and win a unification bout. All right? You can't really top that, can you? So then was unfortunately stripped of his WBA belt because he wouldn't fight Triple G. Then avenged his loss to Mundine in 2017. Right? Then fought Darren Barker over in New Jersey for the belt. Lost that, got screwed out of it. Then in 2014, headlined the Madison Square Garden against Triple G, and still is the only Australian in boxing history to headline Madison Square Garden. Yes, he was a B-side, but who gives a fuck? He fought Triple G, right? One of the greatest of all time. Probably arguably one of the best middleweights of all time, probably second only to Marvin Hagler, right? So how good is that? Yes, okay, he got knocked out in 3 rounds, but still, he fought Triple G. Then he fought Jared Fletcher later in the year, and almost just close enough to a year after fighting Triple G, he fought Miguel Cotto for the WBC belt in, what's it called? Brooklyn. The Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Oh, I should mention that he fought Triple G for the IBF and WBA belt. So basically the 2 belts that Geale had previously. Because after Geale lost to Chock vacated it, and then Triple G picked it up pretty much, I think, straight after that. So, and Triple G had that belt for like, by that time, like 5 years. So Triple G held the IBO belt for like a decade. So And then after Miguel Cotto moved up to super middleweight, but unfortunately was stopped in 2 rounds by Reynold Quinlan for the vacant IBO belt. So even though at the moment both guys have done exactly the same thing, their careers are very similar, were the absolute best in their division, moved up the division above, and unfortunately didn't do too well when they moved up. George obviously got knocked out by Hitchens in 8 rounds. Daniel Geale got knocked out by Reynold Quinlan in 2, and I think Reynold Quinlan would have been a lot bigger than Daniel Geale. Reynold Quinlan is huge. So, yeah, so there it is, guys. Compare to pair. So who had the better career? George Kambosos Jr. or Daniel Geale? Remember, belts won. Significant fights. Headlining, arenas. Is headlining Madison Square Garden a bigger achievement than having 42,000 people at Marvel Stadium? And remember, George was the A side for those his first fight against Haney. If you actually look at Daniel Geale's career, I think for his world title fights, I don't think he was ever the A side, unless he was, the defending champion. But his big fights against Felix Strum, Golovkin and Cotto, he was the B side. Then again, so was George. The best ever win. George's best ever win was obviously Lopez. Geale's best ever win was obviously the unification against Felix Sturm. So what's better? Beating one guy for 4 belts, or beating one guy for his belt while you put up your belt? That's the thing I want to think. What do you think's more significant? Winning 4 belts in one go, or putting your belt up against another guy's belt? So these are the things I want you guys to think about in the comments section. Really let the question marinate. Think about all the aspects that I've presented to you. Do a little bit more research. Get on Box Rec and say, well, George did this, but Daniel did that. Daniel Geale fought Chuck twice. George Kambosos Jr. fought Devin Haney twice. Geale was one of the best fights in Australian boxing history, where George had one of the biggest attended crowds in Australian boxing history. These sort of things. So these are things I want you guys to think about in the comment section. Let me know. Right, like, share, subscribe, all that good shit in the comment section. And who had the better career? George Kambosos Jr. or Daniel Geale? All right, please don't bring money into it, because George pisses all over Daniel. Don't even bring that into it. But as always, guys, tackle the ball, wrestle like hard, and yourselves a fuck up. And we'll talk to you another day.